Well, hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm Dan Turbyville, and this is Powerhouse Fence Show. Thanks for stopping by. Thanks for checking it out. And thanks for doing what you do. So, this week we're going to talk about presentation and professionalism. We're going to look at a history lesson, as I like to do. And we're going to talk about, some things that apply today, what we do, what you may or may not do. And I'll just share some opinions on presentation and professionalism. So, having said that, the show is brought to you by Memphis Fence Company, Simpolo, and MFC Manufacturing. We partner with the Thornton Fence Consulting Group, and we have some Powerhouse Fence Show content on his new online education course. It's called the Fence Line to Success. It is on School, SKOOL, and he's constantly adding more content in there. I was thinking about it actually this morning. And so I love going to his fence business conferences. There's been two, I've been to both. They've both been great events. I really enjoyed them. But I was thinking about it and I was like, man, it- you know, you got to pay to be there. And then you also have to travel to be there and spend days and all. And I think every bit of the content from the 2024 Fence Business Conference is available on that school class. I don't know how you say it. It's school thing for the Fence Line to Success. So check it out. Fence News, good people, good publication. They keep up with all the latest industry trends and they do a lot of stories and cover a lot of people in there. So it's definitely a good thing to check out. And then EZG Manufacturing, they make the fence hog and other big orange equipment that you've probably seen at trade shows. Ah, hello, Alaria. Yeah, I think I'm here. I'm doing it. I think it's working. Thank you for helping out and checking on me. So I am here. I am live. The phone number is scrolling on the bottom of the screen, 901-878-4987. If you do want to call, you can. And everything is set up ready for that in case somebody does. Ilaria says she was worried. Well, thanks for your concern. Everything is good. I was a little bit late, but here we are. Man, I'll tell you, life has been crazy. It's there's a lot of stuff going on. I guess I may as well just talk about this in the face of the world. We have kind of kept it a little bit hush hush as far as the public eye goes, but we have decided that we no longer are interested in being in the world of custom fabrication. Well, actually, to be honest with you, I really love it. I really enjoy doing it. I think it's super cool to take you know, a conversation and turn it into a concept and turn it into raw steel and turn it into a finished product that's standing on someone's property. I think it's really awesome. What I've learned is that it's really hard to do that and to be profitable doing it. And a lot of energy and a lot of time goes into that thing, and it just doesn't quite seem to balance out with the return that we were getting on it. And so we got rid of residential a few years ago. Now we're getting rid of our, custom built ornamental stuff. And we will be selling a bunch of equipment and things out of there and getting the buildings ready to rent. And so if you are interested in some fabrication equipment, let me know. We might have something that piques your interest, maybe. But yeah, so we're getting rid of that. But so we've been dealing with a lot of things, right? We've got two buildings over there. We're trying to get ready to put tenants in. We've got a bunch of equipment. We're doing dirt work. We're doing all kinds of stuff. And so that's been one thing of it. And then just, I mean, the fence business on top of that, right? It's just a busy time to be doing that. And so it's been crazy for me. And anyway, a lot of that led to me being 15 minutes late. That's not the point of us being here, though. So I want to thank you all for tuning in as normal. I appreciate all of you listening, and I appreciate you out there fighting the good fight and doing what you're doing and stick to it, keep going, don't give up. And we'll get through this, whatever it is. Yeah. So if you want to hear us talk about anything, let me know. If you want to be a guest on the show, let me know. I will say there's a caveat to it. I'm not very interested in people being guests who are simply here to promote themselves and sell a product. So there's that. Um, but aside from that, if it just so happens that you sell a product and you also can deliver some value to our listeners, then feel free to reach out. But I am a little bit particular about who comes on the show just because I want the show to be what I want the show to be, right? So, anyway, if you have a guest suggestion, if you want to be a guest, anything like that, any topics that you want us to talk about, some issues you want us to address, anything, just let us know. We'll do our best. We're still running the fundraiser for Make a Wish. It is still linked in the description. So if you do want to go donate something to that, you can feel free to do so. I believe Make a Wish, basically, what we're doing next is so we funded a wish, and the next step in that process is we're now teamed up with a Make a Wish kid and their family, and we get to do a wish celebration. And so we'll all get together, and we'll be able to give them little gifts that are themed towards whatever their wish is, and get to know them, and hang out with them for a little bit and stuff like that. And we plan to do that all as a group with our team here, because I mean, ultimately, this team is what made it happen, and so that's pretty cool. But we'll talk more about that as we know more about that. But for right now, that's what we know. So, having said all of that, we're going to get into the show now. As I told you at the beginning, we're going to talk about professionalism and presentation, and it's something that I take pretty seriously. I try to have, I like a lot of consistency. For those of you that don't know, I did go to civil engineering school at the end of my college career. I was in college for 8 years and didn't graduate with any degree, but civil engineering was the thing that I did at the end of it. I really enjoyed it. And I remember we had a professor and we'd have to write these big papers, right? I mean, 25, 30 page long with a bunch of graphs and charts and all of this data about different experiments that we did. And, we would have to start with a theory, and then we'd have to explain all the reasoning, and then we'd have to test, and we'd have to explain the reason why we did the tests the way that we did them. And like everything had to be based on some credible information that existed, right? So, pretty technical papers that we would have to write. And there was a professor, and I don't know how in the world he did it to this day, but he would go through these papers. And if you put 1 pound and you spelled out pound on page 4, and then on page 20, you put 1 LB, he would count off points every single time that you're formatting your indentions, like anything didn't match. So again, if you spelled out pound and then abbreviated pound, right? Like those two things didn't match. Every single time he would count points off. And it's fascinating to me, even looking back, that he was able to catch all of the things that he did, but he did it and he did it really well. And that is something that it's been with me since then. Right. And that is just that consistency in the way in information that we present. And so we have several people in here who are estimators, bid jobs to general contractors and things like that. And the objective there is that our proposals look the exact same every single time, right? All of the formatting is the same, and the language that we use inside of the proposals is the same. The only difference is the signature at the bottom of it, right? So when they get a proposal from us, they know what to expect. They know where the information is that they're looking for, and they know how to find it. Uh, you know, Obviously, like if you've seen me at trade shows or anything else, you've seen our booth, right? And you've seen the shirts that we wear, and you've seen stuff like that. And there are all these like crazy patterns on them. And that's also on all of our trucks that we run around in. And in fact, the latest skid steer that we bought, we put a vinyl wrap that was as similar as we could find on it. And like that to me is a lot of presentation stuff and marketing and branding, right? Because people remember that. So now I'm terrible at follow up stuff with Simpalo. And so if I gather contact information from people at trade shows or at events or whatever, like I'll send an email out, and I mean, an email, right? Just to tell you how I'm not pushy about that thing, right? It's just kind of a, it's here if you want it type approach. Um, right or wrong, that's how I am. And so now in those emails, I'll put a picture of like me in the booth, right? And so you can see the shirt, you can see the background, and people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember that." And so it is effective from a branding perspective, but I think the presentation of it is important. And sometimes people get not super happy with the way that I think, but I believe it's important. So, y'all know I like talking about these stories from history. Okay, so bear with me a minute. This one's going to take a second to get through. It's it's one of the coolest stories to me, right? I really enjoy it. And so we're going to go back all the way to June of 1864. There's a fella named Robert E. Lee who was hanging around in Petersburg, Virginia, and he had about 60,000 soldiers with him, and they were holding down the fort, right? And so they're about 25 miles south of Richmond on the side of the Appomattox River. I have no idea if I say these words right or not, and I apologize if they're wrong. So Petersburg was a vital railroad and supply hub for the Confederate Army. So, in other words, it was pretty important, right? Richmond, which again was 25 miles away, was the capital. And so, in other words, it was important too. Now, Ulysses S. Grant, he was out going on a walk, had about 125,000 soldiers with him. And they knew if they could take Petersburg, that Richmond would ultimately fall right behind it. And so that would, lead to the collapse of the Confederate Army and end the Civil War. And they decided to go attack Petersburg. And they kept attacking and they kept attacking all the way until April of 1865, right? So 10 months they attacked Grant or Lee and his army in Petersburg. So it finally ended when Grant launched a big assault and they were able to break through the lines and, they were able to take the town. So Lee's army, they'd been beaten on for about 10 months now, right? And they were starving. They had limited supplies. And so basically things just weren't looking up for them, right? They were in a bad spot and they got beat and Petersburg fell. And so at the time, Lee's army was trying to hold 37 miles of a defensive line, and Grant's army had 5 times the men with them, right? And they had supplies and food and all of this stuff. And so, Lee knew as soon as Grant's army busted through that Petersburg was going to fall. And, he knew both cities were going to fall. And he took his army and he fled. And it was in the middle of the night and they took off. And his plan was to go meet with a fellow named Joseph E. Johnston and his army, who also was another general. And, but so at the time, Lee, he was the top target in the Confederate army. And the Union Army and the generals and the leaders, they knew, and Lee knew, as long as he was still out there with an army, that it wasn't over. And he was still a threat. Um, he was seen as a man of honor, duty, and a lot of personal discipline. And that's the way that the Union soldiers described him. In fact, President Lincoln told Grant not to arrest him. He said, "Don't treat him like a criminal." He said, "Let him up easy," right? And Lincoln wanted to start rebuilding the nation and wanted to bring everybody back together, right? And wanted to start that as soon as possible. So that was a part of it. But people had a lot of respect for Robert E. Lee at the time. And so all of that means Grant wasn't going to just let him get away. And so he started chasing him. And they started a pursuit, and there was a cavalry horses that joined in with them under the leadership of a fellow named Sheridan. And so they were running around and they were cutting off everywhere that Lee tried to go, cutting off all his escape routes and all of this stuff. And they chased him through hardwood forest. They chased him through farmlands. It was in the spring, so it was muddy. They had gotten the typical spring rains and all that stuff. And at this point, they had like 30,000 soldiers left. And so when they were going through there, I mean, it was just tracking it up, making it a sloppy mess. And the supply wagons were getting stuck. Artillery was getting stuck. I mean, they were running through swamps and their horses were dying. A lot of soldiers just deserted, right? So they just walked off. I mean, at that point, things are not looking very good, right? And so the wounded soldiers, they were being put in makeshift hospitals along the way, and a lot of times those hospitals were just left with the wounded soldiers in them. Uh, Wagons were being abandoned, right? They were trying to just dump everything they could to try to go as fast as they could, and they're just out there running through their for their life. And so there was a place called Sailor's Creek, and the Union Army captured a quarter of Lee's army at one time. And they kept running, they kept running, they kept running. So this went on for 7 days. They were running. And finally, Lee sent word to Grant that he wanted to surrender. He said, you know what? We're dying, right? We don't have any food. We don't have any supplies. I mean, half these guys are running around barefoot. Like, we're just dying out here. And so they surrendered. And they met at a place called the McLean House in Appomattox Courthouse, Virginia. And so after everything they'd been through, all the chasing, all the running in the woods, in the swamps, in the fields, everything else. So Grant shows up. And I mean, this guy, he looks like he's been rolling around out in the swamps, right? So he's wearing this mud-stained private shirt. He didn't even have on a general's uniform anymore. He doesn't have his sword with him. He's dirty, he's dusty, he's messy. His beard's all going crazy. Like, he just looks like a mess, right? It looks like he'd been living in the wilderness for a week and trying to, catch another army, right? So then Lee shows up, and it's the complete opposite. He shows up in an immaculate uniform, the right uniform. His boots are polished. He has his dress sword hanging on his side. He walks in with a dignified posture. I mean, really presented himself well and displayed professionalism. And he looked the part of a general, right? As he should. Like, even after being chased for a week and being beat on for 10 months leading up to that, like, he still looked the part of a general. And he did it not because it was about himself, right? It wasn't that, he cared about the way that he presented himself. That wasn't the most important thing to him. The most important thing to him was to honor his men. After everything that they had just been through, he wanted to honor them, and he wanted to uphold the dignity of his army, even down to the very last moment when they were surrendering. He wanted to try to uphold that dignity. And so Grant sees him, and he immediately recognizes Lee's presentation and the power that it held, right? And so ultimately they go in, they negotiate terms, do whatever they do. I don't know, maybe sign some paperwork, docu-signs, whatever. And so Lee surrenders to Grant. And as was traditional at the time, Lee held out his sword, right? Because that was a traditional sign of surrender, was to hand over your sword. And Grant wouldn't take it from him. He said, no, I don't deserve this sword, right? And he told Lee, he said, no, I'm not going to take it from you. You keep it. And then he allowed Lee's men all to keep their horses. They kept their sidearms. And he said that they should return home in dignity. And so this was a real shocker, right? And I mean, it was crazy to Lee's men, who are like, man, I think we're about to be arrested and go to prison and, whatever. And he said, no, 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 no. We want you to keep your horses. We want you to keep your sidearms. Go home in dignity. And so a lot of these guys they just kind of broke down and started crying. And then Lee walks out of the house. Hold on. It's time for a tea break here. All right. Sorry. So Lee walks out of the house, and the Union soldiers are all outside, hanging around doing whatever they're doing. And so they all just go silent, and they line up down the sides of the street. And Lee goes out, he mounts his horse, and he starts to ride down the street. And as he does, all of the Union soldiers turn to him, and they stand at attention, and they remove their hats to show honor to Lee and his men, and to show respect to Lee and his men. So even in the darkest moment in Robert E. Lee's military career, right, this is defeat, right? And that's a thing that I doubt, was very accustomed to, right? And so this is defeat. This is a very dark time. But he still maintained his professionalism. and he still maintained his presentation. He presented himself well, even as he walked in there to surrender. And he maintained his composure, and everyone treated him with respect and honor. Now, is that all because of the way that he presented himself that day? Probably not. But again, he had a reputation, right? And his reputation was of professionalism and of honor. And so the people showed him the respect that day. And anyway, I think it's a really cool story, right? I think it's yeah, after everything that these guys had been through, I think it was really cool that that is the way that it was received. But anyway, so there's a history story with Dan. So that was a long story. But now let's talk about some relevant things, right? So let's talk about presentation. So I looked up a definition of presentation, and I did not tell you where this definition came from, but it said presentation refers to the intentional arrangement and delivery of information, appearance, and behavior to influence perception and convey meaning in interpersonal or organizational settings. Okay, so it's intentional. It's the way we arrange and deliver information. So again, I talked about proposals and stuff like that a minute ago, right? So that's an arrangement and delivery of information. The appearance. So that's the clothes that we wear when we go to trade shows, and that's the booth, and that's the continuity across all of the stuff that represents our brand is appearance. And then behavior to influence perception and convey meaning. Behavior is a big one. A couple weeks ago, we were having our little company wide chat over here with everybody. And this was one of the things that I talked about, right? Is like, hey, I look around the room and I do look around and I see who's wearing something with a company logo on it, right? And who's not. And so I was talking about that. I was like, hey, we need to make sure we're wearing something that represents the brand and something that's visible and something that's not falling apart, not ratty looking, not any of that stuff. Like something that's nice. And if you don't have it, go to the office and ask for it. And so I look around the room and we kind of address this thing a little bit. And then we talk about what that means. Right. So it doesn't mean that you show up to work and you just do whatever, act a fool, and hey, I've got my shirt on, but I'm still out here acting crazy. Right. No, 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 no. What that means is that when you have that shirt on, you're representing a brand and you're representing something bigger than yourself. And your behavior should be conducted in accordance with that philosophy. Right. So you should behave in a way that upholds what that brand means. And I mean, a lot of this stuff, like, I don't know. It's important to me. And I think that if you're going to go out and you're going to do some crazy stuff, like don't drive a truck that has company logos all over it. Don't wear company logoed up clothes. Like go home and change clothes, right? I don't know, flip it inside out if you got to. Like do something, right? Don't represent your brand in a way that you don't want it to be represented, if that works. Tea break. All right, sorry. Been having been fighting with a little bit of sinusy stuff, and you know, it's that time of year, I guess. And I have a couple of small kids that like to bring everything under the sun home. So a fellow named Irving Goffman wrote The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. And he describes presentation as a performance in which individuals manage the impressions others form of them through their dress, speech, demeanor, and setting. So, setting's an interesting word there, right? But dress, speech, and demeanor. So, again, you're representing a brand. And if you have pride in that brand, then your actions while you're representing that brand are going to reflect that. So, I think presentation here, I don't know why I keep I don't know. I don't know why it seems weird that I stick this stuff in here, but I think a week or two ago, right, I said something about marketing, and here I am again. I was thinking about this, and I said, well, really, presentation begins when somebody goes to Google or whatever search engine of choice and looks us up. And, maybe somebody's never heard of your company before and they go online and they look you up. So, what are they going to find? Right? What does the website look like? What does the reviews look like? What can they find about you on Google? And then another thing I think is important is what's on your social media. Right? You don't think that there's people out there that go look on social media and figure out, oh, this individual works at this company or this individual owns this company or things like that and go look at people's personal social media and judge a company based on that? I think that all of that, right? All of that is where it starts. And maybe a lot of people don't dig that deep. I personally, when I'm looking something up, I'm not going to go investigate on social media and go find the people and do all of that stuff, right? But there's people in the world that do it. And so I think I don't know, I try to be pretty neutral, right? On social media in general. I try not to have a lot of things that are controversial in any way on there. And I mean, I don't know, maybe there is, but I don't think I do. And so I try to maintain that, right? And I always just kind of act like somebody's watching. Right? That's a good thing for me is if I was sitting in front of somebody right now that maybe they're not a customer for a fence company today, but maybe they know someone who is, or maybe they will be in 6 months or 10 years or whatever that is. Like, I could easily do something right now that would leave such an impression on these people that they would remember for years to come. And when they think of a fence company and they see this logo, on this side, when they see this logo, they would instantly have a flashback to something that happened and they'd be like, I would never call them. Right, and I don't wanna be that guy. I don't wanna leave that impression on anyone. So, starts with your online presence, I believe. That's where your presentation starts, and I think the next or another key moment in the cycle is when they call. I know a lot of stuff happens now with, like, online forums and, kinda communicating through email or text or whatever, but let's just say when they reach out, right? So, to me, it's when they call, and how does someone sound when they answer the phone? Because my wife's on me all the time. She's like, "It's not what you say, it's how you say it." Right? So you might say the right words, but the tone of your voice is off or whatever's off, and, like, it can instantly just leave a sour taste in somebody's mouth. I'll give you an example. I had a lady call me the other day, and apparently I talked to some other person at this company, like, a year ago about some software that they have, and so she starts off and she's like, "Hey, do you remember talking to so and so a year ago about this software?" I'm like, "Well, no. What is it?" Right? Like, "Can you give me something that I might remember?" And so she starts into it and I start remembering a few things and I'm like, "Okay." And within being on the phone with her for about 60 seconds, I knew that the interaction that I had with this lady meant that I would never want to do business with that company at all. Right, and it wasn't necessarily the things that she said, but it was just kind of like the attitude or whatever that she had, right? And so just based on that one interaction, they could have had the best thing in the world that they were offering. And after that one interaction, I was like, "You know what? No, I'm not interested." And in fact, that's what I got to. She kind of went on and we went back and forth a few times. And I said, "You know what? I'm not interested. Thanks for calling. Have a good day." And I just hung up the phone, right? And that all of that is because of the way that she presented herself when she was on the phone. So there's her presentation, right? Because that was the only opportunity she had to give me any sort of presentation. And it was not a good experience. And it made me say, nah, I don't care what you're selling. I don't want it. So that's that was my it wasn't my first impression of the company, right? Because I'd talked to them before, but it was my first impression in recent times, and it was my first impression of her, and it instantly killed it. So that's a key moment, right? So when someone calls, are you hello? Yeah. Something like that, or, like, do you have some kind of, like, positive, chipper, "Hey, thanks for calling," kinda thing when you call, right? Um, and I think that's really important, and I think that I I think in all of that, like, I wanna deliver wow, right? And I wanna deliver wow, which is something that I learned at the, Thornton Fence Business Conference, but I wanna deliver wow. So I'll give you an example of one of the things that I talk about here in the office. Well, before I do that, let me say hi to Alex or Isaac Alexander. Thanks for stopping by. So one of the things we talk about here in the office is along these same lines, right? And the way that we answer the phone and the way that we talk to people. First, before I get into what I was going to say, there's a handful of us that kind of sit within fairly close proximity of each other. We're close enough that I can overhear some conversations. And sorry. And periodically, I'll walk out and I'll say, "Hey, think about that conversation you just had. Did you present yourself well? All right. What do you think the perception was on the other end of that phone call?" And I'll get this response sometime like, "Well, you can only hear one side of it." Well, guess what? The person you were talking to can only hear one side of it too. So the caller and me, we both hear the same words that come out of your mouth. And I said, "Man, you got to remember, it's the way that you're perceived. It's not your intentions. It's not what you say. It's how you say it, right?" So deliver the wow. So the example I have, we have an ignorantly large minimum for residential fence. And so when people call and they say, "Hey," because kind of to give you a little bit of history about that, right? I don't want you to think I'm lying when I say we don't do residential and then I tell you have a minimum. Well, it's both. So when we decided to stop doing residential fence, people would call and say, "Hey, can you give me a quote on fence at your house or at my house?" And we're like, "Ah, we don't do fences at your house." And they're like, "What? How are you a fence company and you don't do fence?" And so we've had that argument a dozen times. And finally I said, "Okay, we're going to give them the stupid minimum. And, if somebody wants to hire us when they know what our minimums are, then it's a big enough job that we'll figure out how to get it done." We still do have subcontract crews and we still who do have tools and we have vendors and we have all of those things that we can do residential fence. And if it's a large enough job, then we'll figure out how to do it. But anyway, so they call and they want us to do a residential fence for them, right? And I want them, even though we're going to tell them we have this minimum and it probably is going to make them go away, right? Which is kind of the point of it. But I want them to be so impressed by that phone call that the way that we present the information to them, right? The way that we arrange it, the way that we present it, the way that we carry ourselves. I want them to be so impressed that in a week or two or three or six or whatever it is, I want them to get mad, right? And I know that sounds crazy, but I want them to get mad. And I want them to remember that 60-second or 90-second interaction that they had with us. And I want them to be mad that they have to deal with someone else and they can't deal with us. Right. So I want to cram so much wow, so much amazing content in that little tiny window that they know that they wanted to hire us, even though we wouldn't do their job. So hopefully that makes sense. I just want to leave that impression, right? I want to leave such a positive impression on them that they remember it. And then, when we do work for people, we do install fence as it turns out. And so when we do hire or when they do hire us and we do a job for somebody, I want them to be so thrilled and so impressed by the way that we conduct ourselves, by the way that we get the job done, by the way that we show up when we say we're going to show up and do the things that we say we're going to do and do it right, then I don't want them to ever consider hiring anyone else. Now, I want the job to go that well for two reasons. One is because, well, ultimately, I want their business next time, right? I mean, we are a for profit organization and we need profit to survive and we need jobs to survive. So, yeah, I want their business next time. But also, I don't want them to have the experience that I don't want them to endure a poor experience, whether that's with us or someone else, right? So even if they call somebody else next time, I don't want them to have to go through a bad experience with a fence company. I can't control everything. We can't control other industries. We can't control what other people do, but what we can control is what we do. And so I want the experience to be so great that they would never consider calling anybody else. And I don't want them to have a bad experience, right? I don't want to make people's life worse. And I know I've had experiences in hiring people, and I've had experiences in talking to people, and I've had negative interactions with people, right? And I want to be able to provide a service here to our local area that is just one little shining light out of everyone that people have to deal with, right? Like that's what we want. So, kind of what sparked this whole presentation professionalism conversation was a couple reviews that we read on Google, I suspect. Hold on. So, I'm going to read them to you. And it was not about a fence company. These reviews were some other industry, right? They weren't a fence business. I'm not going to tell you what they were, but they weren't a fence business. So review number one says worker hit my truck and tried to drive off while waiting on the police. They went in Walmart and bought a 12 pack. Okay. So apparently somebody hit their vehicle, and it's not really clear, right? They said they tried to drive off. Oh, so they tried to drive off. They were unsuccessful in driving off. And then while they were waiting on the police, they said, I'm going to go in Walmart and get a 12 pack. Now, I am assuming this was a person who has a vehicle that has company logos on it. They have some clothes, right? Shirt, hat, whatever that have company logos on them. They're representing the brand. And they hit somebody, tried to drive off, and then while they were waiting, they went in Walmart and bought a 12 pack. I would lose my freaking mind over this stuff, right? Like, yeah, things happen, right? I mean, our folks, they're liable to run into somebody tomorrow, right? I hope not. I pray not, but it's like it's possible. It's not likely. It's possible. And I mean, things like that happen, right? And it's really hard to leave a super positive impression on somebody when you just ran into their new car. So there's that. But yeah. So they tried to drive off. Bad. And then while they're waiting on the police, they decided to make good use of the time and go inside and buy a 12 pack. So then the next one, littered at a red light, threw a lit cigarette out of the passenger side of the truck. It actually says a lot cigarette, but I assume they meant lit cigarette. So they're just sitting at a red light and they flick a cigarette out the window and they don't think anything of it, right? But there was somebody at that red light with them that is a potential consumer of whatever goods or services they provide. Maybe not that day, maybe not tomorrow, but one day that individual would be a consumer of what they offer. And now that person would never consider hiring them all because they flicked a cigarette out the window. Now, yeah, some people are, a little bit over the top with the way that they judge everybody and what they expect people to do. But at the same time, uh, you're representing a brand and it's all about perception, right? It's not about intention. It's not about what you said. It's about how you said it. And so just think about that. You got logos on that vehicle, you got logos on that shirt, you represent that brand. In my opinion, neither of these things are acceptable. And again, when you're representing something bigger than you, you got to represent the thing that's bigger than you. Yeah, and again, I always like to assume that somebody's watching, right? And they're not judging you because they don't know who you are, right? But they see that logo, they see that name, they see whatever on your shirt, and that's who they're judging. So all that's important. It's all important. It's all a big deal. But all of this is easy stuff to change, right? All you got to do is just be aware. It's not like you got to go out and spend money to change the way that you represent your brand. If you're in the situation where you have the logos and all of that stuff already, you've already spent the money. Just make it worth your investment. So when you show up on a job site, Do you show up in a vehicle that presents yourself in the way that you want to be represented? I thought it was really cool. Kenny and I went to a job site, and I think Kenny was on the show in the early days, but Kenny and I went to a job site a week or two ago. I don't know. And so we pull up, and again, if you've ever seen the shirts, the background of the trade show booths, anything like that, that's the way our trucks look too. You can go look as a Memphis Fence Company on social media, and you probably can find a truck fairly easily. But that's how all of our trucks look. And so we show up with this vinyl wrap truck, and Kenny is super adamant, super anal, super meticulous about keeping his vehicles clean. Like, you get in anything that Kenny drives, and it's going to be clean inside, outside, underneath, backwards, forwards, every which way. It's going to be clean. And so we show up, clean truck, vinyl wrapped. Both of us get out wearing our logoed shirts, matching shirts. I mean, and I was proud of the way that we presented ourselves when we showed up on the job site. And we looked around, and there was two other people there. And I'm not knocking them. They do what they do and they make it work. But I'll just say we showed up in a vinyl wrap truck, and we showed up with the uniform shirts and all of those things. And I don't know, it made me feel good. I liked it. I felt good about the way we presented ourselves, right? And whether it sells us a job or not, who knows? I don't know that the customer even cared about it, right? But and I may have been the only one there that even noticed, and it maybe just mattered to me. But I feel like it kind of sets us apart a little bit and just gives us a little bit of professionalism that some other people might not get, right? And I don't know what the situation where that pays off is, right? Is it when two people give quotes that are both the exact same number? Do they choose us because we have a nice truck? I don't know, but it made me feel good. And that's important too. So you don't have to have a new shiny truck, right? Like that's not a requirement of it. It's okay. But I mean, the truck could be clean, and you could have like body panels that are all the same color, and you don't have to have taped on trash bag windows on the truck. I mean, I think all of that really, just to sum it up, is take a little pride in the vehicle, because the vehicle is an outward extension of yourself, and the vehicle represents your brand the same as your shirt and the same as your work. So, like I said, maybe just wash it every now and then, and make sure that it's not the bumper's not dragging down the road, or something crazy like that. Hold on. I'm sorry. And then when we go to bid a job, oh, I'd almost skipped over this part. So what about company logos? Our company logo has been around for probably, I'm going to say, at least 25 years, the one that we have now. And before that, I don't know that there really was there wasn't an icon with the logo, right? So on the logo, there's this little piece of chain link here, and it says Memphis Fence Company out to the side of it. It's a blue rectangle. So before this, we had signs that just kind of had Memphis in an arch and then said Fence Company underneath it, and it was a blue rectangle. I'm not sure if there was any kind of logo or anything that went along with them. I'm not aware of one, I'll say. Maybe there was, but I know this has been around probably, like I said, 25 years or so, and it's been a few different versions of a very similar thing. And we've refreshed it and we've modernized it. I could have used this as an example. So these are our current fence signs from JC Gary, looking super nice. But like I said, we've modernized it, we've refreshed it a little bit. We changed the text that's on it. It was a square at one point, and we went back to this rectangle because this rectangle is kind of like the old school way of doing it, and it was a little bit nostalgic for me. But so I mean, you see, like, our logo is not anything super fancy, right? But it is a logo, and I think having a logo is important. And so if you don't have a logo, maybe just like go to Fiverr and give somebody $100 and they'll make you one. And you may be able to find somebody to do it for less than that. But I mean, I would go to Fiverr. I would give them a description of the logo, maybe give them some samples of stuff that you like. Even if you've got a logo that's 40 years old, it still might not hurt to go to Fiverr and kind of just get a little refresh of it, right? Get a current version of it. Maybe I put all of this stuff out of proportion. I'll just be honest with you. Maybe I do. Maybe I think it means more than it really does, but I think it's important. So now, when we bid a job, again, I've already mentioned our proposals, right? So we have different proposals and they all are formatted the same. All the wording is intended to be similar. I'm not sure that we nail that 100% all the time, but it is at least similar. I'm confident in that. It all has our logo on it, blue logo. And that's the only thing blue, right? I think it's important when you give a proposal to put a scope of work and a price on the front page. And if you want to give a 10-page long proposal, that's fine. But I think the scope of work and the price should be on the first page, uh, especially when you're bidding to general contractors. I think it's important because I try to put myself in their shoes and I think about this. If I'm a general contractor and I'm getting, I've got a bid day tomorrow and I start getting sub prices today. Well, let's say there's 40 trades that it takes to do this job. And each one of those, I'm going to get 5 bids on, right? So now I've got basically a crap load of proposals to look through. And I have to make choices for all of these trades of who I'm going to hire to do each piece of it or who I'm going to go in and bid with, right? So not necessarily who we're going to hire yet, but I have to be confident enough in the proposal and in the numbers to go in and present it to the customer, the client, the owner, and say, hey, this is what we could do the job for. And I also need to make sure that the scopes are covered, right? So I think it's important that we send proposals to general contractors before the due time, right? Like I don't want to wait till the last minute and them not be able to review it. I think it's important to give it to them a little bit early and give them time to go over it, give them time to check it out. And again, the scope on the first page, the price on the first page. I've been told on several occasions that that's really the only thing that they care about. Now, if you're new, if you're bidding jobs in a different area, bidding jobs to somebody from out of town that maybe doesn't know you, anything like that, and you want to put some company information on there, go ahead, put whatever kind of, I call it fluff, right? Put whatever kind of fluff you feel like is important in there, but put it on page 2 and 3 and 4. And if you got to send 10 pages, then, put it behind the scope and the price. Let them see the part that they're looking for at the beginning. Don't make them flip through all that stuff and try to find it. But anyway, so our proposals are all done according to those kind of rules. They know it's from us, right? It's got a big letterhead at the top. It's got our logo at the top. They know who it's coming from. It's all typed out. It's all legible. It's not a handwritten quote on a piece of receipt paper. I've received those from people before, and that's okay. If somebody's coming in to do a $200 plumbing job at my house and they give me that, I'm okay with that, right? If somebody's bidding $100,000 project to me and they hand me a proposal that's handwritten on a generic receipt paper, I'm probably not going to hire them. And unless there's like a drastic difference in cost and I'm confident enough they can do the job right, there are scenarios where I might consider it, but they're all automatically at a disadvantage. Let me tell you, man, I tell so many stories, don't I? Anyway, let me finish this piece of it, right? Just take a little extra step to make it right. If that means you got to type it, I mean, handwritten's okay. At least get forms printed, right? Print out some forms that make it look a little bit more legible and make it make sense. And I think forms are a great idea because really it prevents you from forgetting things. We have some forms that we use, and it'll say how many feet of fence, what size are the line posts, what size footings, what size are the terminal posts, what size footings, and like it goes through this whole thing, right? Well, what it does is it makes sure that I put all of the right information on this thing if I fill it out. So I think forms are okay. If you got to handwrite them while you're out there in the field, go for it. But at least you could have a nice form, has a logo, has a header, has all of the stuff where you can fill it out. Like it still maintains some professionalism, right? It's not a piece of notebook paper. Um, so the story I have to tell you is it's professionalism. Okay. So I've got a generator that was installed at my house, a backup generator. And so I reached out to a couple people and I was like, hey, I want a price on installing this backup generator. Well, one person was worked at the same company as I'll just say a close acquaintance of mine, right? A family member. And so that we schedule a time to be at my house. Well, this joker shows up 15 minutes late, and immediately it no longer mattered what he said, what he did, what his price was. None of that mattered to me. I was not hiring him. He showed up 15 minutes late and he had some excuse about, a train derailed in Kansas. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. That's a joke. Um, whatever the excuse was, it didn't matter, right? Because he showed up 15 minutes late and he didn't call and tell me that he was going to be late. And that is not okay to me. I mean, I think if you're going to be somewhere and you agree to do a thing, right? So you're agreeing to install a fence, you got to install the fence. We'll be out Monday to do your job. You got to be there Monday, or you got to call them and let them know. And I think that same philosophy applies to any type of meeting that you're going to, right? If you're going to meet somebody to try to sell them a thing, if you tell them you're going to be there at 10 o'clock, you better be there at 10 o'clock or call them 10 minutes beforehand and say, hey, I'm running 8 minutes late. I used a GPS anytime that I'm doing any of this stuff. I use a GPS, not because I don't know the way. Sometimes that's the case, but because it tells me what time I'm supposed to be there, right? An estimated time that I'll be there. And that lets me know, hey, I'm going to be there on time or I'm going to be there 3 minutes late. And I will freaking text somebody and tell them I'm going to be 3 minutes late, or I'll call them and tell them I'm going to be 3 minutes late, right? That's the professionalism in the presentation that I like to have is don't just show up late and be like, oh, sorry, I don't know, there was some traffic and I'm late. And I think I even asked him, I was like, and you didn't call? Oh, well, I didn't have service when I got out here close to your house. Like, well, I promise you, somewhere you were within 15 minutes of getting here or 25 minutes of getting here, you had service and you could have called then. Anyway, I didn't hire him, right? Simply because of that. And like I said, it was the company my family member works at. I think that person, the family member, would have made sure that the job was done well and went over well. But because of that, I said, no, no thanks. All right. So we've talked about this a little bit, right? So if you've seen us at any kind of fence industry events, at trade shows, the Thornton Fence Business Conference, right? That we've talked about a few times. Any of this kind of stuff you've seen me at. So I wear the shirt, right? I don't know. We call it the crazy shirt. And I always wear the same thing. The trade show booth matches. We always wear these uniform shirts, right? If you see us in Memphis, our trucks match here. Our skid steer that we bought, we put out a cat video a few months ago, and it was when we were doing the demo of this machine that we bought. And we've posted on social media and stuff like that. In fact, a guy from Caterpillar, the factory, I think in Illinois, came down here the other day, and he said, "Oh, by the way, I've seen your skid steer online. It's famous." And he's like, "This is the best looking cat 265 that we've seen." And, we all know about it or something like that. Right. But, uh, not that that sells fence business, but our fence work. But, you know, still, if this guy knew about it, maybe somebody in Memphis has seen it on social media and thought, man, that's cool. And then they say, hey, I need a fence. Right. And they think of us. And that's the point of all of that is just to stand out in some kind of way that somebody's going to think about us when they need the thing that we do. Ah, man, I was talking to somebody about that yesterday and I don't even remember. Oh, I know what it was. I was talking to a guy and he was talking about doing some like design construction management work. That's kind of the world that he's in, right? Or not kind of, but that is the world that he's in. He was talking about doing design work and construction management and stuff like that. And he's like, I was thinking about introducing this new client that he's trying to land. He said, "I was thinking about introducing him to some of the people that I know in the construction industry and, doing all that kind of stuff with the hopes of one day landing some business from these people." And they have some projects coming up that they've kind of been talking about a little bit. And he said, even if they don't hire us for these projects, he's like, one of these days he's going to need something. And I want to be the person that he thinks of when he needs the thing. Right. And I want him to be like, oh, I know. I bet so and so knows a person that can do that, right? And so now you're becoming the go-to resource, you see? So that's what we were talking about. But yeah, so all our trucks match. We wear these shirts. Mainly everyone around the office wears these. And I mean, there's days where mine's a different color, and like there's days where people wear a different shirt. But for the most part, most of our folks around here wear these shirts. And it's really cool to me. And every once in a while, I just kind of like slow down enough to smell the roses. And I realize that everybody's wearing these shirts. And I don't know. It gives me a good feeling, right? And I feel like we look like a professional organization. When someone walks into our office and they see us all around in our uniform shirts, we have on some, presentable pants, whatever that is. I'm not too particular about it, but don't show up here looking like you got in a fight with a lawnmower this morning. In fact, that's an exact quote from what I told somebody that was here. He was he was here from a temp agency and he showed up with some breeches that had holes in them. I said, "Nah, that ain't gonna work." So, like I said, I'm not too particular about that, but I do like all the shirts to match. And I think it just kind of gives us a little bit more professionalism, right? And they don't have to be polo shirts with logos embroidered in them and all of that stuff. I mean, you can get some I don't know, $10 or $12 t-shirts that are printed. I was driving this morning and I passed one of a repair that our guys were knocking out of the park, by the way. I was really impressed with the progress that they had made by the time I drove by there. But I was driving by and I look over and, there's a group of, I don't know, four, however many people it was. They all have matching shirts on and they all have, our branded shirts on. And then we have our vinyl wrap truck sitting there. We have a vinyl wrap skid steer sitting there and another vinyl wrap truck. And I was like, man, that's cool. Right. I mean, it just made me feel good about it. I was proud of the way that those guys presented themselves when they were doing that repair this morning. So if anyone's listening who was on the truck that was doing the repair on the side of Watkins this morning, good job. So it's cool, right? And I think it just makes where when somebody drives by and they're like, wait a minute, look at all these guys in orange shirts. What's happening there? And they look over and then they say, "Oh, wow, look at that truck," right? Or maybe it just stands out enough. Maybe it's not even, "Oh, wow, like I like it." It's just like, "What in the world?" Right? And they see the truck and they see, "Oh, Memphis Fence Company." Well, I don't need a fence, right? But then they're somewhere in 6 weeks and they look over at a fence and they see our sign hanging on it, right? And then they're somewhere else and they see our name again. Well, 5 years from now, maybe that brand is stuck in their mind because of the way that we presented ourselves over time and we branded, right? So now we have brand recognition with them. So, yeah, we're getting close to the end here and just in time, 58 and a half minutes right now. So we've talked about a lot of things. And I think ultimately when you're interacting with people and when you're out and about and when you're doing whatever you're doing, the perception of who you are is what really matters. Um, my my brother, he rides a sporty motorcycle, I believe a sport bike. And so, we've had some conversations about the majority of the people that ride these sport bikes and just kind of like around here, you see a lot of them trying to do 150 miles an hour on the interstate and things like that. And, you just kind of like build this perception based on things that you see people doing. You don't even know them, right? But you just build a perception based on what they do when they're in that scenario. And so, again, you're driving down the road, you're in a truck that's got company logos on it, and you do a thing that's someone perceives as being unacceptable. Well, now all of a sudden you have given them that negative perception while you're representing your brand. So The way the brand is perceived is important. The way your attitude is perceived. When you answer the phone, the way that you present yourself, when you interact with people, no matter if it's a dispute or not. And I'm not saying lay down and let people walk over you. I definitely do not believe in that. We have fired customers who are overly rude. I have no problem doing that. If you want to be a jerk, I don't want to do business with you. Right. And so I'm not saying lay down and let people treat you however they want to and you just be all happy about it. Right. But the way that your attitude is perceived is what's important. And the way that your professionalism is perceived is what's important. So maybe what we can all do, including myself, is reflect about that. Right. Because I'm not always the most cheery person. There are times wherever I'm a bit grumpy, and I've been, like I kind of mentioned earlier, things have been crazy, right? So I've been feeling a little bit of pressure to get a lot of things done here recently, and I've probably been a bit grumpy. I've been a bit sleep deprived, and I probably haven't been the most pleasant person to talk to. And so I too am a person who needs to think about this, okay? And I need to think about the way that my attitude is being perceived and the way that the way I present myself in those scenarios. So regardless of what's going on, I still have to try to always maintain this professional presentation. And it's important. And a lot of that, I think, is hey, if you do go to fence events, you go to other association events, you go to whatever, like you probably don't want to be the sloppy drunk dude in the room, right? Some people might think it's funny, some people might not. So just I always act like somebody's watching, right? Always act like somebody's listening. And if you kind of get that in your head, I think things go a little bit better, right? Or maybe act like there's a camera crew following you around and it's going to be aired on national TV. I don't know, whatever works for you, right? There's some sort of kind of like mind games that we can play with ourselves and we can get that point across. But yeah, just think about the way that other people perceive you and the way that you present yourself. And we're done here. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for the support, as always. And we will see you next week.